Hello and welcome to Who Are You Calling a Professional, hosted by Snacktime Media. I'm your host, Katie, and I can't wait to dive in with y'all today.
Well, hello and welcome.
Thanks.
So we'll dive right in today. I think we'd like to get started. I'd love to get started with your name, your role, job title, industry, and anything you want to say about the job that you do.
Awesome. My name is Mac, and I'm a Quality Assurance Engineer Senior Associate, and I work for the First Responder Solutions team at Peraton.
So how did you hear about this company or find this job originally?
Honestly, it was before my senior year in college, and knew I should probably look for an internship. And one of my family friends worked for a different company at the time and kind of sent my resume in. And they brought all their interns back from the COVID year. And so they didn't have a full position for me. So they kind of made a position or made a space for me to fit into. And then Peraton ended up buying that department. All the interns went over with everybody who was transferring, who had a full-time position. And I got a call. My resume went on somebody's desk, and they thought I'd be a good fit for their team. And that's how I ended up with my initial internship with this company. And then after senior year in college, I continued to work with them full-time.
Nice. So was there ever a hesitation on, after the internship, if you were going to stay there? Did you apply to any other places, or what did that look like?
I had one interview through another family friend that I didn't end up getting the position. But honestly, everyone knows how it is senior year of college. You don't really like the stress of trying to find a job. It's so overwhelming. And so having that position pretty secured felt really great. And so I didn't look at a ton of other options. And I also was super happy in my position with my internship. I liked the team I was working with. I liked my boss, the management. I liked what I was doing. And so that made it really easy to kind of secure that decision in my mind and go, all right, I like what I'm doing already. Why not just do it full time?
So when you were in the internship to what you started doing right out of college, was it a similar type of role, or was your role fairly different between the two?
So my internship, I started with one team. And then for my full time, I switched over to a different team. I was still working with similar code base, but just different applications for our products.
Awesome. And this leads me into my question of what do you do? What are you doing each day? What are you working on? How does that look?
Yeah. So most days I'm working on generating test cases for some of the different features of our products. And then once the developer finishes what the actual code is working on, sometimes I'll do the pit test. So I'll make sure that everything works well. If there's any edge testing that needs to be done to confirm that any original features weren't impacted by new development. And then when it comes to bigger releases of the product as a whole or versions, we go through release testing specifically for any new features. And then we do regression testing, which goes through a whole bunch of older test cases that cover existing functionality, just anything related to the product that could have been impacted so that we cover all the bases.
So are you doing any of the back-end work or coding, or are you mostly on the testing side?
I'm mostly on the testing side now. I'm sort of switching into a middle ground area where I'm entering back into that code part of the job and starting to ramp back up on our code base and learning code again, because I studied computer science and math in college, so I do have some experience with that. But since the year after my internship, I've been kind of strictly test since then.
And so in this role, how do you describe the most rewarding part of this role?
It's hard because obviously nobody wants to find issues, but I think it's also so rewarding when you think something may not work and you figure out exactly what it is that doesn't work. Or obviously when things go exceptionally well and you are ahead of schedule or ahead of a deadline when it comes to a release, things like that are super rewarding. I think just like any person who works with code too is going to say either finding what is in your code that doesn't work or having your code succeed. Like those are all huge rewards.
Is it kind of like a fun game to try to find what doesn't work, or is it frustrating? What does that feel like?
It's fun when it comes relatively quickly. It is so frustrating when it takes so much longer to figure out what it is that isn't working, or like when you know it's something but you can't figure out where exactly that's coming from. That's so frustrating, and having to go over it a million times with your eyes, it definitely helps to get other eyes on it, but it's super frustrating when somebody just comes across it for like 5 minutes and they're like, oh, I figured out your issue. Here it is. And you're like, I've been looking at this for how many days now? And you just wandered over here and found it.
Is it mostly solo work or do you have kind of a teamwork there?
There's a little bit of teamwork, especially with testing right now, because I have to work hand in hand with a lot of the developers who are actually doing the functionality work and working on those features really in depth with the code. And so I have to talk with them a lot, figure out exactly what it is that I need to test, what features could be impacted to make sure that I cover any regression, things like that. And then some of it, if I know the product well enough, which I have been with this team for several years now, so I do know our product pretty well. So if it's covering a lot of older features, then I don't need to work with my team a ton, and it's a lot of individual work. So it goes back and forth depending on the day.
And then with that, is there times where your work is a lot busier and less busy, or is it kind of a consistently busy job?
I would say it's more consistent for the most part. And then probably quarterly is when we try and do releases. That's when it gets super busy. So we have pretty strict deadlines for customers on when they want to get releases out. And if something in one of the test cases doesn't work properly and that requires the devs to go back into the code and fix something else, and it can take a lot of time, or if they can't figure out the issue, that definitely could put us behind schedule, which can be really stressful.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I feel like a lot of the coding jobs, the release timeline is chaotic.
Yeah. Like I feel like you can be so set on the timeline too, and you're like, oh, we're fine, we're going to make it. And then all of a sudden one tiny little thing pops up and you don't expect it. And then you're several days behind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything that people think that you do for work, but you don't actually do that at all?
Oh. I think with the product specifically that I work on, some people may like have some kind of crazier ideas on exactly what it is. I can't go into too specific, but I think most times, I think being remote too is hard because people are like, do you even actually do work? I'm like, yes, I am sitting, even though I'm at home all day, I am sitting and working at my computer like for the entire 9 hours a day that we do work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything since you started this role that surprised you?
I think this sort of in between with remote work of not having close relationships with your coworkers, and especially moving to a new city around the time that I started this position, and then having several friends who were full-time in person, who knew a ton of their coworkers and would hang out with them. That was a hard balance of, oh, I actually don't really know my coworkers that well. And I think I was surprised to not necessarily develop super close relationships a long time that we were working together. But when you're remote, you kind of just say hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And then you get right into what you're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah, I think that part of the remote world people don't always talk about. It seems so nice and glamorous, and then you realize
exactly.
It can be lonely.
Yeah. And I think the flexibility is so nice, and being able to go home for the holidays and still not have to take PTO is super nice. And I think people talk about those aspects of remote work and all the pros of just in general flexibility and being able to have an office in your home and set up however you want to have it set up, not have to do the commute. I know I'm super thankful I don't have to commute anywhere, but I think the things that people don't focus on when it comes to remote work is the lack of relationships within the office, because there is no office. And I think it's just hard to separate if you don't have a specific room or a separate place within your home that you can go to work. It's hard to separate home life from work life a little bit.
If you were looking for another job, would you want one that has an office? Or what do you feel about that?
See, I feel like I always want to say yes. And I think hybrid would be just the best possible option. But I think currently with where I am at life, the remote just has so many more benefits for me than being fully in person would. And I think especially now, one of the biggest things that I would look for with an in-person job would have been those relationships and friends within the office. And obviously I would love to still have that, but that's not something that I necessarily need, because I do have a pretty solid friend group within the area that I live.
Yeah. I think definitely when you first get a job, though, I could see that really being a holdup.
Yeah.
Being
shoot. A lot of the people I work with are a lot older than me anyways. And so I don't know that if we were in an office with the current position I'm in, if we would have the same relationships that I've kind of seen some of my friends have.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like I was one of the lucky ones who started with young people. So
Exactly.
I'm on the other side of that. And just people out of college, to be honest. But do you have any times in this role where you feel like everything went wrong, or just what makes this job extra stressful?
I think going back to, I know we've touched on it a little bit, but when you get to those releases and you're on a stricter timeline and things do go wrong, like I know this past year or two, I've started to step into the lead testing role for my team. And so I'm the one that's in charge of getting everything ready for release testing, setting up the test suite, and getting everything prepared to start, and kind of running the whole testing process. And so when we run into errors or things fall behind in that, it is a huge stress on me because I want to make sure that our team is meeting deadlines and making sure that everything is going properly. And you don't want to rush the testing process because you want to make sure that you're finding all of the issues that potentially could be there, and you want to make sure you're giving out the best product possible. But also it's really stressful when you're not necessarily lining up exactly with the timeline that you have set.
Yeah, I feel like any job with timelines is just adds stress all the time. So no, that makes sense. Moving on into kind of the balance of this role, how do you feel like you can unplug, or can you unplug once you're off the clock?
I think it's hard when you work from home a little bit to unplug. And I have ADHD like most people nowadays, so my mind is constantly running. And so I feel like there'll be times throughout the day where I'm not working and all of a sudden something pops in my brain relating to work, or like could be the answer to one of my problems. And so I like have to either write it down, because we work 40 hours a week, or it switches. I get every other Friday off because we work 9-hour days. But if it's one of those days where I have my Friday off and I'm not supposed to be working, and all of a sudden this thing pops in my brain, then I can easily add in a couple extra hours this week, and then next week I can take a couple hours of flexible time. And so I think there's a balance of trying to unplug, but I'm also extremely extroverted, so I find that most evenings I'm like trying to get out of the house anyways, and I think that probably is especially because I'm fully remote too.
Yeah, and so when you're out of the house, do you feel like you're checking your email or checking anything, or are you kind of able to disconnect from people trying to reach you?
I think I'll never be able to fully disconnect, but I think if I'm out and about and doing something, then it's definitely easier to kind of take my mind off of that and not be checking for those things.
Awesome. Well, thank you. The next items we'll be wanting to talk through is who makes a good candidate for this job. So in your time there, have you seen skills or qualities that really separate people from succeeding for just plateauing or even not doing well in the role?
I think in general, this can apply to several other different jobs as well, but I think you're more likely to succeed if you have the drive or desire to continue to learn. And I think being flexible and being willing and able to learn from those around you, and just like kind of hitting the books again, will allow you to succeed, versus if you kind of get like stagnant in your position and you're just doing what you need to get by versus trying to keep pushing yourself to do better.
So if you're hitting the books, let's say, is that researching things in code or YouTube videos, or what's a good place people can learn stuff like this?
Our company has like specific certificates or like training that we could do. And so there's a lot of like code training that I'm actually trying to get back into as I transition into the more code focused role. And so trying to do some of those. They have textbooks, they have different like learning opportunities that we can go through for that.
That's so helpful. I feel like that's always nice when you have a suite of learning opportunities offered at your company. Is there anyone who would really dislike a role like this?
I think anyone who can't like sit still and focus on the computer. It is hard to kind of be working on one thing for such a long period of time. And that was one of the biggest adjustments for me from college to a full-time job, is going from several different classes, different topics, to then pretty much focusing on one entire thing for at least one day, sometimes several days. And so it is like sometimes hard to be only working on that one thing for a little bit. So I think if you need constant new different activities or different focus, then that could be a little bit hard. I also think if you don't like being remote and can't handle the antisocialness that it sometimes brings, then that definitely would be a reason why you would not like this job.
No, those are really good considerations. Was there any time when you felt like this job was right for you or you felt like you're really in the correct role?
I think initially just the adjustment right out of college was a little bit challenging, but I think anyone goes through that when they're starting a new full-time job. I think that imposter syndrome of not feeling like you belong, like you're not good enough. And so I think that was a little hard, but I've always loved math. And well, I knew I loved math, but I didn't really focus on computer science until my dad told me I probably should all through high school. And I didn't listen to him until my senior year in high school. And I was like, wait, actually, I do kind of like this stuff. And so I think it does really fit my personality. And the reason I like math, I like that there's pretty much an answer for everything.
Yeah. I think that part makes it fun. It's almost like a puzzle at work to solve sometimes. Yeah. And I'm like, that's the thing I like.
Exactly. Like I can't write at all. I'm a horrible writer, but I know if there's an exact answer and I need to find it, like that makes a lot more sense in my brain.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good fit. We kind of touched on this a little bit about how you might transition back into more of a coding role, but for you or for other people in your role, what does a typical career progression look like?
There's pretty much two avenues that I think you can kind of focus on, and that's whether you wanted to go more of like a management route and go through that process, or you can continue to grow like and be a different level of engineering. And so the more experience you gain, the more knowledge you have of code in general, different languages, and then just time at the company too can push you to the different levels of engineering. And there's different like status marks for each role.
Is it common for folks to get promoted on like a biannual basis, or is that less common there?
Less common on like a strict like basis. I think it's more about what work you're doing, how you're showcasing that you're able to reach the skills that are required for that next level. And then I think it definitely depends on like how we're doing as a whole and what is available to promote people every year.
Oh, that makes sense. Has your lifestyle changed at all since you've gotten this role? I know you got out of college, but how do you say this would impact your lifestyle?
Ooh, I definitely think it, with any job though, I think you're like a little bit more sedentary. And that was something that was definitely a hard adjustment of like time to sit down and focus. And so I think it really made me have to focus on what I'm doing outside of work to have social interaction, to be active and focus on that time, because I wasn't getting some of those things throughout the day. Like I wasn't chit-chatting with people in the office. I wasn't getting any sort of social interaction unless I was intentionally reaching out to people for things that I needed. And again, it wasn't like fun conversations to get to know each other. It's more of a, hey, how are you? And we're getting right into what we need to do and talk about work. And so I think it made me more intentional with what I was doing outside of my work hours.
Yeah. And I think that is such a crucial part that you get to have outside of work hours. I think some people I've talked to in their jobs are all encompassing and they have no free time. So it's good that you can manage the job and prioritize your lifestyle outside of work as well.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of what you would do next, are there any doors that you feel like this job has opened, ways that it's kind of made you a better candidate for any other position?
I think in general, I mean, there's been a lot of development since I did start as a senior in college. And I think even that first year out, that was my first real work experience. I've had like odd jobs throughout my entire life, but kind of that like real work experience of something relating to the field that I had been studying in college. And so it like brought everything I was learning in college fully to life. I think it's definitely helped me progress in more like formal communication and learning how to take things from a really high level and be able to explain them in ways that people can understand. And I think that's great for the role that I'm specifically in now, being able to communicate with the developers, but then also write test cases that people can understand. And like you're supposed to write it as if a baby could be able to do the test case. Like it has to be very specific instructions. And so I think that has definitely improved over the last couple of years. Yeah.
I like that. And then with those improvements, is there do people usually stay at this organization or in a role like this? Or is there a place that you would maybe go next or a role you would kind of progress into?
I think a lot of my company too, people have stayed for quite a while, which is kind of nice because you can see like the development of our product through those people as well. Because when you talk to them, like, oh, like I remember what it used to be like several years ago. And I think that's something that's really cool too, is to see how much you've developed in the past couple of years and what you've gotten to work on and see that really come to life. I think also I really like what I'm doing. And so it's hard to really think about switching to a different career when everything is kind of in a perfect position for me. I like what I'm doing. I do like the remote. It's more beneficial for me now. I think maybe down the line eventually it would be nice to find something that obviously had like hybrid, had an office to go into, anything like that. But I think until I'm either kind of not progressing or am not liking what I'm doing anymore, that I would fit or I'd stay.
And then when you do stay, do you feel like there is a ceiling to kind of how far you can progress in a role like this, where you'd have to change roles or change positions to kind of make more or have a different lifestyle? Or what's that like?
I do think there's pretty much a ceiling that you could hit. And I think in most places there probably is that ceiling of what level engineer that you can end up getting to, how much pay that you could get. If you go the management route, there's obviously like ceilings to that as well for how far that you can progress. So I think, again, that plays into it of different considerations that might push somebody to go look for a different job.
Yeah, I think that's common. That makes sense. So the final questions I have are really how folks could get into this industry or a job like this. So if someone did want your job, what would be the fastest path for them to get there?
Ooh, I think definitely having background in coding, knowing different languages. I think honestly putting yourself out there and applying for different internships, different full-time positions. I know people always say, like, obviously there's an extent, but applying for things that you may not think you're qualified for, because in any position you're going to have to learn something new. And I think you can get so much further if you're willing to learn and you learn easily. Then I think it's easier to kind of coach and train somebody if they have that type of personality, even if you don't have necessarily the most experience.
And then with coding, is typically a computer science degree required, or any degree, or do you see some self-taught people coming up in the industry?
Ooh. I feel like most people that I encounter, they have some sort of background and degree with either like engineering specifically or computer science, and code specifically. I think there probably are people who have self-taught themselves different languages. But again, I think it's all about how you showcase yourself and how you could fit into the team that you're trying to enter. Because I do think also going into kind of one of the next questions that we talked about, like, I think connection and like who you know can be more beneficial than just degree and experience, because that's how I got into this field. Yeah. I think being personable, being able to talk to people, and like using those connections and showing that you'd be a good fit in a role and showing that you're willing to learn can get you so much further than maybe just having that experience and not being able to show that like you're wanting to be there, that you're wanting to learn, and maybe you don't have the most experience. But I think if you can prove that you belong there with some of the other skills, then that's more important.
And then with candidates coming up now, I feel like a lot of things are changing because of AI. Is it typically seen in your role better that you're incorporating AI into your business, or is that frowned upon? What does that look like?
I think there's a balance. Obviously, there's some things that we can't use AI for. Like we can't use it for a ton of different information, but being able to ask the questions in a way that will get you what you want, I think is super beneficial with AI. And I think that's where a lot of people like maybe struggle to understand it, is they're not asking the right questions to get the right response that they are looking for to answer their questions. And I think when you're learning kind of basic code, it can be beneficial to help you learn how to debug and what different languages are, what maybe would be useful for those languages. But I think it's not necessarily, you can't rely on it too in the end.
Yeah. I feel like there's always, in every industry, AI is kind of creeping its way in. So I was curious to see the perception. And then finally, are there any required skills, programs, or things people should study up on before applying to a role like this?
I think having a vast overview of several different coding languages is super beneficial, just because you never know what languages are going to come and go, what specifically people decide to use, what companies decide on the language to use. I also think that being able to communicate from a high level down to a level that normal people can understand is super beneficial. I think just like communication in general with any job is super important. And I think good organizational and time management skills as well.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any portfolios that you've seen, or are people demonstrating kind of coding projects that they've done, or is that less common in this role?
Like in terms of when you do interviews for the roles?
Yeah.
Ooh. I actually never did a formal interview for this position, so I have no idea what the exact like application process. I feel like mine was super like random and weird during a transition period for the entire company. And so I think my experience is going to be super unique. But I know in some other interviews that I've done, they've either asked to do math problems or explain kind of the process behind what coding would look like for a specific problem. And so I think that could be something that comes up within the interview process.
Yeah, and I do think it's good to call out. I feel like a lot of people get roles from connections, and it's good to use your connections. So I feel like you did it in an awesome way. So that's really all the questions that I had. Is there anything else you want to share or any advice you'd want to give to someone who's trying to get into this industry?
Ooh, I don't think anything else to share. I guess maybe some advice would just be, I think it sounds silly and people always say it, but like, shoot for the stars. You never know where you'll end up. Like, go for it, try it, even if you don't necessarily think that you'll get the position. No matter what, there's some sort of experience that you can benefit from, whether it is you make it through the interview process. There's always something that you can learn and that'll help you improve within this world as you go through different interview processes. So I think there's always something that you can take away from a position, even if you don't end up getting it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mac. That was so fun.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you'd like to be featured on a future episode, please go to snacktimemedia.net or reach out at whoareyoucallingaprofessional@snacktimemedia.net. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend or leave a review. Hope you have a great week. See you again next week. Bye, everyone.